When my father sent me that text message on November 15th, 2023, I think he expected me to beg. He expected tears, desperate phone calls, maybe even showing up at his doorstep pleading for forgiveness. What he didn't expect was for his weak daughter to reply with a single word. Okay. And he certainly didn't expect what happened next. The moment I withdrew every single dollar from the account that would bring his perfect new life crashing down around him. My name is Cordelia Ashworth, and this is the story of how my father tried to erase me from his life, and how I made sure he'd never forget the price of his betrayal. Part 1. The Perfect Family Illusion. Growing up in Hartford, Connecticut, everyone thought we had the perfect family. My father, Richard Ashworth, was a successful financial advisor with a corner office and a reputation for being the man who could make anyone rich. My mother, Evangeline, was the kind of woman who volunteered at every school event, baked cookies for neighbors, and made our home feel like something out of a magazine. I was their only child, their miracle baby, as my mother used to say, born after 7 years of trying and 3 heartbreaking miscarriages. My parents doted on me, or at least my mother did. My father was always a bit distant, always working, always promising that next weekend we'd do something together. But I understood. He was building something for our family, or so I believed. What I didn't know was that my father had been building something else entirely, a secret life that would eventually tear everything apart. It started when I was 22, fresh out of college with a degree in accounting. I had just landed a job at a prestigious firm in Boston, but I came home for Thanksgiving in 2019, excited to share the news with my parents. That's when I found the first crack in our perfect family portrait. I was helping my mother set the table when she dropped a crystal bowl, the one that had belonged to her grandmother. As she knelt to pick up the pieces, I saw something I'd never noticed before: bruises on her wrists, partially hidden by her sleeves. "Mom, what happened?" I asked, my heart already sinking. She looked up at me with eyes that held years of secrets. "I fell, sweetheart. You know how clumsy I am." But I knew my mother. Evangeline Ashworth was the most graceful woman I'd ever known. She didn't fall, she didn't bruise easily, and she certainly didn't lie, not to me. That Thanksgiving was the beginning of my awakening. Over the next few months, I started paying closer attention. I noticed how my mother flinched when my father raised his voice. I noticed the way she apologized for everything, even things that weren't her fault. I noticed the expensive gifts that appeared after their disagreements. A new necklace, a designer purse, a weekend spa trip. The gifts weren't love, they were payments, apologies wrapped in price tags. Part 2. The Unraveling. In March 2021, my mother called me at 2 a.m. Her voice was barely a whisper, broken by sobs. "Cordy, I need you to come home, please." I drove 4 hours through the night, breaking every speed limit, my heart pounding with fear. When I arrived at my childhood home, I found my mother sitting in the dark living room, holding an ice pack to her face. My father had hit her. Not for the first time, I would learn, but it would be the last. "I'm leaving him," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "I've been saving money for years, hiding it away. I'm ready." I held my mother that night and made her a promise. I would help her escape, and I would make sure my father could never hurt her again. What happened next took 2 years of careful planning. My mother filed for divorce in June 2021, and my father, predictably, hired the most expensive lawyer in Connecticut to fight her. He tried to claim that she was mentally unstable, that she was an alcoholic, she wasn't, that she was an unfit wife who had neglected her duties. The court battles were brutal. My father wielded his money and influence like weapons, trying to leave my mother with nothing after 32 years of marriage. He froze their joint accounts. He canceled her credit cards. He even tried to sell the house out from under her. But my mother had something he didn't expect: documentation. Years of it. Photographs of bruises, medical records, journal entries, recordings of his threats. And she had me, an accountant who knew exactly how to trace hidden assets. Because here's what my father didn't know. While he was building his legitimate business, he was also hiding money. Lots of it. Offshore accounts in the Cayman Islands. Shell companies in Delaware. real estate investments under other names. I found all of it. Part 3, The New Woman. The divorce was finalized in September 2023. My mother walked away with 60% of their assets, a victory that my father never saw coming. He was furious, humiliated, and looking for someone to blame. He chose me. "You turned your mother against me," he screamed during our last phone call. "You poisoned her mind. You're the reason my life is ruined." I didn't argue. There was no point. The man I'd once called my father was a stranger to me now, a cruel, narcissistic stranger who had terrorized my mother for decades and felt no remorse. What I didn't know was that my father had already moved on. Just 3 weeks after the divorce was finalized, he announced his engagement to a woman named Brittany Monroe, a 28-year-old social media influencer he'd been secretly dating for 2 years. 2 years, which meant he'd been cheating on my mother while simultaneously accusing her of being an unfaithful wife. The irony was almost poetic. Brittany was everything my mother wasn't: young, flashy, obsessed with appearances. She drove a white Mercedes convertible, a gift from my father, wore designer clothes, and posted constantly about her perfect life with her soulmate. I watched from a distance as my father's social media transformed. Suddenly, he was posting photos of beach vacations, expensive dinners, and hashtags like living my best life and second chances at love. It was as if my mother and I had never existed. That's when the message came. Part 4, the text. November 15th, 2023, 8:47 p.m. My phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Cordelia, I've made a decision. You sided with your mother and destroyed my marriage. You are no longer my daughter. I disown you. Any further communication should go through my lawyer. Do not contact me, Brittany, or anyone in my life again." I read the message 3 times, waiting for the pain to hit. But it didn't come. Instead, I felt something unexpected. Relief. Relief that I no longer had to pretend to love a man who had never truly loved anyone but himself. Relief that the final thread connecting me to his toxic world had been cut. I typed my reply, "Okay." Then I put down my phone and smiled. Because what my father didn't know, what he couldn't possibly know, was that I still had access to one very important account. Not a joint account with my mother. Not a secret account I'd discovered during the divorce. No, this was an account my father had set up years ago, back when he was still pretending to be a good parent. It was a trust fund, established in my name when I was born, meant to pay for my education and help me start my life. My father was the trustee, but I was the beneficiary. And I had just turned 25, the age at which, according to the trust documents, I could withdraw the funds without his permission. For years, my father had bragged about this account to his friends and colleagues. "I've set aside nearly $500,000 for my daughter's future," he would say, as if it proved what a wonderful father he was. He loved the image of the generous patriarch, even if the reality was something different entirely. But here's the thing about my father: he was careless. He assumed that because he controlled the account, he controlled me. He never imagined that I would actually take the money. After all, in his mind, I was still his dutiful daughter who would eventually come crawling back, begging for forgiveness. He was wrong. Part 5, the withdrawal. The morning of November 16th, 2023, I walked into Hartford National Bank with my identification, the trust documents, and a calm determination that surprised even me. "I'd like to close this account and transfer the full balance to my personal account," I told the bank manager. She raised an eyebrow. "That's a substantial amount, Ms. Ashworth. Are you certain?" "Completely certain." The balance was $467,000. Money my father had been hoarding, money he probably planned to eventually redirect to his new life with Brittany, money he thought he could dangle over my head forever. Instead, it was mine, every cent of it. I walked out of that bank feeling lighter than I had in years, not because of the money, though that certainly didn't hurt, but because I had finally broken free. My father had tried to use his wealth as a weapon, first against my mother and then against me. Now, his weapon had been turned against him. What I did next was the part that surprised everyone, including myself. Part 6, the real revenge. You might think I used that money for something extravagant. A new car, maybe, a luxury apartment, a trip around the world to celebrate my freedom. But revenge isn't always about destruction. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply building a better life. I used $100,000 to pay off my mother's remaining debts, medical bills from the years of accidents, legal fees from the divorce, the mortgage on her small new apartment. I wanted her to start fresh, without the financial chains my father had wrapped around her for so long. Another $150,000 went into starting a nonprofit organization, Safe Harbor, a foundation that provides legal and financial assistance to domestic violence survivors. My mother was one of the lucky ones. She had resources, education, and a daughter who knew how to fight back. But so many women don't have those advantages. I wanted to give them what my mother had given me, hope. The rest I invested in my own future. I bought a modest home in Providence, Rhode Island, far enough from my father to feel free, close enough to my mother to be there when she needed me. I started my own accounting firm, specializing in helping women navigate their finances during and after divorce. But here's the part that really made my father lose his mind. Part 7, the aftermath. Word travels fast in wealthy Connecticut circles. Within weeks, everyone knew that Richard Ashworth's daughter had withdrawn her trust fund on the same day he'd disowned her. The story spread through country clubs and cocktail parties like wildfire. Suddenly, people were looking at my father differently. Not as the successful businessman who'd been victimized by a bitter ex-wife, but as the kind of man who would disown his only child, his miracle baby, via text message. Brittany, it turned out, didn't love my father. She loved his money and his status. When his reputation started to crumble, when the dinner invitations stopped coming and the social media followers started to drift away, she found a new soulmate, a 35-year-old tech millionaire from San Francisco. She left my father in April 2024, taking the Merceds and a significant portion of his remaining savings. Apparently, the prenuptial agreement he'd insisted on wasn't as airtight as he thought. My father's business began to suffer too. Clients don't like working with financial advisors who have messy public personal lives. His corner office was downsized. His partner bought him out. By the end of 2024, Richard Ashworth was a shadow of the man he'd once been, alone, diminished, and forced to face the consequences of his choices. Part 8, the phone call. On January 3rd, 2025, my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number at first, but something made me answer. Cordelia. My father's voice was thin, tired, nothing like the commanding tone I remembered from childhood. Richard, I replied. I couldn't call him Dad anymore. That word belonged to a fantasy, a father who had never really existed. I made mistakes, he said. There was a long pause. I'm calling to apologize. I listened to his breathing, waiting for the catch. With my father, there was always a catch. I need help, Cordy. My business is failing. Brittany took everything she could. I don't know what to do. And there it was. I'm not going to help you, I said quietly. Not because I hate you, but because you need to face the consequences of your actions. You hurt Mom for 30 years. You tried to destroy her in the divorce. You disowned me over a text message. You don't get to come back now that your new life didn't work out. Cordelia, please. No, my voice was firm but not angry. I'd moved past anger. You taught me something valuable, Richard. You taught me that love isn't about control. It isn't about money or power. And it isn't about convenience. You never loved us. You only loved what we could do for you. I took a breath. I hope you find peace someday. I really do. But you're going to have to find it without me. I hung up the phone and looked out the window of my small house, where my mother was planting flowers in the garden. She was humming something, an old song from her childhood, and for the first time in as long as I could remember, she looked happy, truly happy. Epilogue. It's been almost 2 years since that phone call. My nonprofit has helped over 300 women escape abusive situations. My accounting firm has grown to employ 5 people, all of them women who understand the importance of financial independence. My mother lives just 20 minutes away. She's taken up painting, joined a book club, and recently started dating a retired English professor named Harold who brings her flowers every Sunday and thinks she hung the moon. As for my father, I hear things occasionally through the grapevine. He sold the big house and moved to a smaller place in New Haven. His business never recovered. He's alone now, no wife, no girlfriend, no daughter who will answer his calls. Some people might feel sorry for him. I don't. Not because I'm cruel, but because I understand something now that I didn't understand before. Some people create their own prisons. My father built his with lies, manipulation, and abuse. The walls that surround him now are walls of his own making. I used to dream about revenge, about making my father feel the same pain he'd caused us. But real revenge, I've learned, isn't about hurting someone else. It's about refusing to let them hurt you anymore. It's about building a life so beautiful, so full of love and purpose, that the person who tried to break you becomes nothing more than a distant memory. My father texted me that he disowned me. I replied, okay. And then I withdrew every dollar and built a life he could never take from me. That's not revenge. That's victory.